There is a moment, silent and sharp, in which the past returns like a cold breath on the back of the neck. No one calls him, but he comes, sometimes disguised as the words of someone who's known you for years, other times in a casual comment, in a look that seems to say, "I know who you were." It is at this very moment, when the echo of what has already passed threatens to invade your mind again, that Napoleon Hill makes himself heard. His voice is not that of an ordinary man, but that of an awakened consciousness that understands that every memory, every pain, and every fall is a training ground for the mind. He said that the man who does not control his thoughts is a slave to his own destiny. And perhaps that is precisely why so many are lost at the first stroke of memory, because they have not learned to direct the invisible power that carries all their victories and all their defeats. Power of the mind. The past is a double-edged mirror. It can either remind you of where you came from or try to convince you that you're still there. But Hill taught that whatever the mind accepts as truth transforms into reality. So when you blame yourself, when you believe that nothing has changed, you are only allowing the old shadows to reanimate within you. The real battle is not against the world, but against the image you still hold of yourself. How many times have you tried to explain yourself, prove that you've changed, show that you're not the same anymore? And how many of those times did you feel that, no matter how much you said, the other person didn't hear you, as if you were talking to a wall that only reflects what it wants to see? Hill would call this collective mental imprisonment, the human habit of repeating the same vibrations, of remaining stuck in a frequency of guilt, fear, or need for approval. He believed that thought is a magnetic force, and that every emotion is a silent order sent to the universe. So every time you react to judgment, you are reinforcing the invisible prison that keeps you chained to what. But there is something grand about this conflict. The mind, when put to the test, reveals its divine nature. Napoleon Hill saw man as a being under construction, shaped by the fire of experience. He believed that failure was not the opposite of success, but its foundation. Everything that hurt you was actually a honing tool. Nothing happens by chance, not mistakes, not memories that insist on returning. Hill said, every adversity contains the seed of an equivalent benefit. This seed does not germinate in comfort, but in consciousness. You only realize the power of a lesson when you decide to stop running away from it. Think for a moment. What if your past is not the enemy, but the teacher? What if what they try to throw in your face is just a reflection of the fear others have of transformation? Napoleon Hill claimed that the awake man is always feared by those who are still asleep, because their change forces them to face their own immobility. It's easier to attack those who have evolved than to admit that it's also possible to change. So when someone tries to remind you of who you were, it's not about you. It's about the discomfort your evolution. Hill called this law of reflex. Every criticism is a disguised confession. When someone else accuses you, they reveal what they fear within them. When he tries to put you down, he's just trying to maintain control over the version of you you no longer belong to that time. And here comes the first point of tension. If you know you've changed, why do you still react? Why do you still try to prove something to someone who doesn't want to? Hill would answer, simply because most people live under the sway of emotion. The conditioned mind reacts before it thinks. Man who reacts choose. He just repeats. Hill's stoic power and mental power converge at this point. Both require presence, awareness, and mastery. Calmness, he said, is the greatest side of power, because he who is capable of remaining silent in the face of provocation is no longer confined to the field of reaction, and if it doesn't react, dominates. He who masters himself masters destiny. However, there is a subtlety that few. Mastery is not an armor that separates you from the world, but a lens that makes it clearer. Being your own master does not mean being cold, but Napoleon Hill did not preach indifference. He preached conscience. He believed that wisdom is born from the balance between emotion and reason. Repressing what you feel is not strength, escape, but recognizing what you feel and choosing how to act, that is power. The true master is not the one who destroys the impulse, but the one who transforms it into directed energy. So when the past confronts you, Hill wouldn't say, run away. He would say, look straight ahead. Observe, accept, understand. Only what is understood ceases to dominate you. It is at this point that Hill's presence becomes almost spiritual. His philosophy was not just about wealth, it was about mental direction, about building a consciousness capable of creating prosperity in all forms of life. He believed that every thought shapes a particle of reality, and that every emotion is a vibrational command that structures the future. So when someone tries to hurt you with who you were, the emotional reaction you choose is the building block. You can build walls of resentment or temples of serenity. It depends on what you decide to think now. Hill would write, the human mind is like the soil. It does not choose what it germinates. It only multiplies seeds. And that's why how you respond defines what grows inside you. When you react with anger, feed the past. When you respond wisely, you nourish the future. Still, there is something deeply human about feeling. The memory awakens old emotions, and for a moment, you turn to who you were. But Hill taught that this regression is just a test. It's the universe asking if you've really learned. Every time you go through the same situation and choose to react differently, you prove that you have transcended the cycle. Learning is not a theory, it is a new vibration. And this vibration doesn't need to be explained to anyone. It manifests itself in silence, in calm gestures, in a way you don't respond in the same tone. The world calls it coldness. Hill called it spiritual maturity. He said that the man who understands the power of the mind does not argue with ignorance, he just walks. What happens to those who don't understand? Why does other people's judgment have so much power? Because most people still live in search of validation. Hill stated that fear of criticism is one of the 6 great enemies, and it is precisely this fear that keeps so many trapped in the illusion of the past. When you fear what they say, you give away your freedom. When it depends on approval, it denies the truth itself. And while seeking acceptance, cease to be authentic. The real power is not in convincing the other, not having to do it. The mind that knows what it is does not beg for recognition. She creates, builds, and follows. Ultimately, every provocation is an invitation, a life test to see if you have mastered what you claim to understand. Napoleon Hill believed that the universe doesn't give you what you want, but what you are prepared to bear. So when the past returns, it doesn't come to destroy you, it comes to measure you. He wants to know if you still identify with what once hurt you, or if you are bigger than that. With every memory, with every word that touches you, there is an invisible question hanging in the air. Are you still that character, or have you become the author of a story? And this is where the first part ends, not as a conclusion, but as an awakening. Because Hill would say that the real turning point doesn't happen when the world recognizes you. It happens when you recognize your power to choose. Choose the thought, the emotion, the response. Choosing silence over war, presence over defense, serenity over anger. And when that choice becomes natural, when the mind learns not to bow to the past, you realize that the power you sought outside was always within. It was you who forgot him. It was you who will remember him now. And in doing so, you will experience what Napoleon Hill called the true beginning of freedom, the moment you understand that no one can use your past against you unless you allow it. Sometimes the past doesn't come back screaming, it comes back in a seemingly innocent conversation, memory that someone brings up unintentionally, or in a comment that seems like a joke but carries the fine edge of intention. It might be at a family lunch and someone mentions, with a wry smile, "Remember when you did that stupid thing?" Everyone laughs, but you feel the knot in your stomach, the discomfort you try to hide. It's not the fact itself that hurts. It's the invisible weight of the judgment. It's as if, for a second, everything you've built since then ceases to exist. Napoleon Hill said that the human mind is a mirror that reflects the strongest image it receives. And often, it is precisely the reflection of others that tries to erase the new image you have been building of yourself. There is something cruel and at the same time subtle about it. People get used to the old version of you. They knew how to deal with you. They knew how to read you, how to predict your reaction. But when you change, when you become calmer, more aware, when you no longer respond with anger, something in them becomes unstable. Hill said that change arouses 2 reactions, admiration or resistance. Those who still live in fear feel threatened by its expansion. Then, without realizing it, they try to reduce you back to the size they know. It's more comfortable for them to believe that nothing has changed. And that's why, when you evolve, many begin to test the limits of your new peace, not out of malice, but out of unconsciousness. They want to see if she's real. A man who studied Napoleon Hill's principles once recounted how, after years of struggling to rebuild his life, he met an old childhood friend. This friend, upon seeing him, smiled and said, "You always were stubborn. I bet you're still the same as ever." Inside, he felt small. Outwardly, he smiled. But something changed in that moment. He realized he didn't need to prove anything. The peace I felt did not depend on the approval of others. And as his friend spoke of the past, he thought, "You are still there. Not anymore." It was at that moment that he understood what Hill meant by the man who masters his own mind, masters all circumstances. Because when you learn not to react, the power changes hands. But the past is insistent. He tries to infiltrate from all sides. Sometimes it appears in the form of guilt, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in people who swear they are just reminding you of who you were. But in truth, they are remembering who they still are. And this is where Hill's teaching takes on an almost spiritual depth. He said that man is the result of the images he feeds. If you keep looking in the rearview mirror, it's impossible to see the road ahead. The mind is a fertile field. What you plant grows. So when someone tries to revive an old mistake, the test is not about the mistake, but about harvest. Will you plant the seed of guilt again, or will you choose to sow the awareness of what you have learned? Think about how many times the world has called you by a name that you have failed to answer. How many times have they tried to provoke you, expecting the same behavior as before? Hill said that habit is an invisible force, and that most people keep repeating the same patterns as they don't recognize their own mental conditioning. But the one who wakes up, the one who observes before reacting, begins to break the chain. And breaking a pattern is scary, not just for you, but for everyone around you. They don't know how to react to silence. They don't know what to do when you don't defend yourself, when you don't try to justify yourself, when you just observe. There is power in this, a power that disconcerts, that disarms, that reveals more about the other than about you. Hill taught that the enlightened man does not need to prove his own transformation. Light does not explain itself, it only shows what is there. And when you decide not to play the provocation game, not weakness, it's sovereignty. You become like a still lake. Stone can be thrown, but it only causes ripples if you. True strength is not the roar of the lion. It is the serenity of the ocean. Nothing shakes. And yet, this serenity is tested again and again. It's as if the universe asks, "Sure you're at peace?" And every time you respond without reacting, something inside you expands a little more. Hill called this spiritual self-mastery, the ability to transform attack into an opportunity for growth. Imagine a woman who has been criticized for her flaws for years. They said she was impulsive, that she never finished what she started, that she talked too much. Over time, she studied, changed, worked in silence, and built a new life. But whenever I met someone from the past, I heard, "You're still the same, just know how to dream big." And at first it hurt her. She wanted to explain, show her results, tell everything she had learned, until the day he realized that the explanation was words would be useless to those who choose not to say. That day she smiled, and instead of answering, she just thought, "I'm glad I don't." For the first time, Hill would have called this moment a mental victory. Instant when the old self finally says goodbye, without pain, without anger, only with gratitude. The human mind, Hill said, is a power plant that never shuts down. It transforms any energy into something. If you feed it with fear, you create obstacles. If you feed it with serenity, you create paths. Therefore, every memory of the past is also a chance to build the future. The question is, what do you choose to do with what you feel? To react is to revive. To respond, the first movement holds you. The second sets you free. And it is this freedom that confuses those who still live in the pattern of reaction, that do not understand the power of their silence, nor do they realize that it is the sound of transformation. There's something almost mysterious about the way it presents you with the same situations and to change the way you see them. Hill stated that the repetition of conflicts is not punishment, learning. You attract the same kind of trials until they lose their power to affect you. When you finally understand this, the scene repeats itself, but the emotion doesn't. You look, recognize, and feel no more pain. It is at this point that the past ceases to be the enemy, becomes the master, and every master one day lets the student follow. But what happens to those who refuse to let the past die? They live trapped in the role they once played, like actors who haven't realized the show is over. Hill would say that these people are prisoners of emotional habit. They cling to memories because that's all they have left whole. They use other people's pasts as a curtain to hide their own emptiness. And the most curious thing is that when they try to diminish you, they are just trying to feel bigger in the face of their own stagnation. So when someone uses your story against you, don't make them an enemy. See them as a mirror. He is unknowingly showing what he has not yet managed to overcome in himself. And what is a reflection should not be fought, only understood. The past is an insistent visitor, but it only enters when the door is always yours. Hill said that energy flows where focus goes. If you focus on the offense, it grows. Put it into consciousness, it disappears. The pain is not in what they say, but in the importance you give to what they say. You can choose to react and repeat the cycle or remain and transform. With each choice, the universe watches, silently, waiting for your step. And perhaps that is the central lesson of this second journey. The past has no power. It has echoes, and these echoes only find strength when you respond on the same frequency. Napoleon Hill wouldn't invite you to run away from the old voices, but to understand them as reminders of what you've already overcome. He would say that every memory is a test of the mind, and every test is an opportunity to prove that you are already greater than all that. When someone tries to reduce you to what you were, smile inside. They are still stuck where you started, while you're already walking in another direction. And it is precisely this silent, firm, and serene walk that will become living proof that the past does not define you. It only revealed the path. There is a moment, silent and definitive, when human beings realize that fighting what has already happened is like trying to hold the wind in their hand. This moment has the bitter taste of surrender, carries within it the seed of wisdom. Napoleon Hill said that nothing is truly lost. Everything transforms within the mind that understands. Acceptance, therefore, is weakness. It is the moment when pain ceases to be bound and becomes understanding. The person who accepts is not one who conforms, but one who understands that there is power even in ruins. Because where pride sees destruction, consciousness sees destruction. Hill believed that the first step to mastering one's destiny is to accept the past without. He saw the mind as a laboratory. Every emotion, no matter how dense, can be refined into creative energy. Suffering for him is the raw coal of the soul. All it takes is fire and intention to convert it into light. And acceptance is that silent, invisible fire that begins by burning the ego, but ends by illuminating consciousness. When you say, yes, this happens, something reorganizes. The body relaxes, the mind becomes, and time, once an enemy, begins to flow. Nothing is more liberating than letting the past occupy its right place, that of a teacher who has already taught what needed. But why is it so difficult to accept? Why do we resist the inevitable, as if there were honor in fighting against what already happened? Hill said that refusal to accept is attachment disguised as strength. It's pride trying to save what has already crumbled. When you deny a mistake, it doesn't disappear, it just hides, waiting for the right moment to reappear. And it always reappears, because what is repressed doesn't dissolve. It deforms. Acceptance, on the other hand, arms the sight. It transforms what was once a prison into a portal. Have you ever noticed how everything we resist the most ends up returning with greater intensity? How the situations we avoid seem to find us again and again in new forms and different faces? Hill said this is the mind trying to complete interrupted learning. The universe is not punitive, it is pedagogical. It repeats lessons until the student understands. Understanding is accepting. As you try to rid yourself of pain, it continues to guide you back to its source. But when you finally face it head-on, it loses its power. Because what is understood ceases to hurt. There's something almost sacred about accepting your own story. It's the moment when internal judgment gives way to gratitude. You realize that nothing was in that. Failures taught you humility, losses taught you detachment, and betrayals taught you discernment. Hill said that a person who forgives themselves transforms mistakes into tools. Mistakes, then, cease to be obstacles, instruments. Everything that once weakened you begins to serve as a foundation for a new version of yourself. But what if the guilt insists on returning? What if the memory still lingers? Perhaps the secret isn't to fight the memory, but to embrace it as one would an ancient visitor. Hill believed that each emotion has a unique vibration, and the trained mind can redirect any energy toward. Thus, guilt can transform into learning, fear, intuition, and shame into humor. It all depends on the direction you give your thoughts. Acceptance, in this sense, is the alchemy of the soul, the invisible process by which the lead of suffering becomes the gold of wisdom. What if we accepted that nothing bad we've ever experienced was truly a waste? That even the most bitter mistakes contain the secret code of who we would become? Hill said that the difference between the ordinary man and the awakened man is simple. The former sees tragedy, the latter sees training. To those living in unconsciousness, life seems unfair. To those awakened, it is all. Everything that happens has a specific purpose, even the moment it hurts too much to understand. Acceptance is also an act of courage. It requires looking within and acknowledging the parts that still hurt. It requires saying I made a mistake without turning it into a sentence. Hill said that failure is just nature's way of showing you the path that doesn't work. It's the compass of evolution. Therefore, those who accept move forward. Those who resist repeat. And the more you repeat, the more you believe life is cruel when, in fact, it's just persistent. It doesn't want to punish you, it wants to polish you. How many times have you tried to erase something from your past, as if the absence of memory could mean freedom? And how many times has this attempt made you feel even more trapped? Hill asserted that forgetting doesn't liberate, only numbs you. True freedom is remembering without pain. It's just looking back and saying, now I understand. When that moment arrives, lightness that can't be explained. What once tormented you transforms into silent strength. And there's a hidden beauty in this. What hurt you becomes what shaped you. What brought you down becomes what will sustain you. Hill said there are no permanent defeats, only temporary results. Failure, he said, price of consciousness. Accepting the past, there, is accepting the cost of one's own evolution. You cannot reach maturity without first going through immaturity. You cannot achieve mental mastery without first experiencing chaos. What if the world doesn't understand your new calm? What if they insist on reminding you of what you were? Hill would say, it doesn't matter, because true judgment doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. When the mind finds peace, external noise, just noise. No one has the power to shame you when you've already forgiven. Shame is the poison that only works while the once healed, the other person's words hit and return, powerless to penetrate. Acceptance is the silent gateway between who you were and who you are becoming. And it doesn't happen all at once. It's a gradual process like the dawning of the day. First comes the shy clarity, then the warmth, Little by little, you realize you don't need to defend yourself or justify yourself. Everything that was heavy begins. The mind opens, the body rests, and the heart returns to beating in time. Hill said that it is in this state of serenity that true strength is born. Acceptance is not the end of pain. It is the beginning of wisdom. And perhaps this is the great mystery of life. That which once seemed to destroy you was, in fact, what prepared you to understand. Because accepting is not surrendering, it is transcending. It is looking back and realizing that even without knowing it, everything has always worked in your favor. Hill said that masters of the mind do not seek to erase the past, but to illuminate it until it becomes a map of one's own greatness. And that is why the person who accepts what they have lived will never be the same again. They become free, whole, and silently. There comes a point in the human journey when pain ceases to be an enemy and is the raw material of consciousness. It is the moment when suffering, once seen as punishment, reveals itself as a tool for refinement. Napoleon Hill called this process mental transmutation, the power to transform the impact of any adversity into a creative force. He said that every defeat contains the seed of an equivalent benefit, but this seed only germinates when the individual stops asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begins asking, "Why did this happen to me?" This simple yet profound shift opens an invisible portal. What once seemed like tragedy begins to reveal a purpose. The mind that once closed in self-pity begins to work toward its own evolution. And it is at this point that humanity discovers that pain is, in fact, a mirror. It shows what is not yet healed, what still needs to be understood, what still requires transformation. Hill once told the story of an American businessman who lost everything in a fire: his home, his factory, his savings, and even his reputation. He could have succumbed to despair, but according to Hill, it was in this utter emptiness that the man found a clarity he had never known. Sitting in the ashes, with no employees, no money, and no plan, he realized that for the first time he was free from the fear of loss, as what he feared most had already happened. This man rebuilt his life based on a simple idea: if I can endure the worst, nothing can stop me. Within a few years, he not only recovered what he lost, but built something even greater, with the serenity he had known. Hill saw this kind of story not as a coincidence, but as living proof of a universal law: man grows more in the valleys than on peaks. There's something paradoxical about the nature of pain. It seems to destroy, but in fact, it reorganizes. It's like an internal earthquake that collapses old structures to make room for the new. Hill said that failure is merely nature's way of testing the authenticity of desire. Adversity is a filter. It separates those who merely dream from those who are willing to transform. Most give up at the first blow, not realizing that pain is the messenger of transformation. When life hurts us, merely inviting us to break free from inertia. And the greater a person's purpose, the more intense the trials they face. Why then do some rise from the ashes and others remain in the grave? Hill responded that the difference lies in how each person uses thoughts. The common man thinks reactively, he feels, and the awakened man thinks creatively. The creative mind does not deny suffering. It observes it, decodes it, and uses it. This is how Hill, after facing countless financial and personal losses, decided to study the most successful minds in history for 20 years. He interviewed men who had faced ruin, betrayal, bankruptcy, loneliness, and they all had one thing in common: they did not allow pain to define them. They used it as fuel. But what about those who never seem to get back on feet? Perhaps it's not bad luck, rather a lack of direction. Hill believed that human beings possess within them a mental energy capable of reshaping any reality. However, this force is only activated when pain is understood. He said that no man begins to think truly until he has been deeply wounded. Wounds, in this sense, are gateways to consciousness. Those who have never been tested by loss rarely know what truth is. And those who have learned to transform pain into power begin to walk through life with a different outlook, a different calm, a different attitude in the midst of chaos. There's a little-known story about one of Hill's disciples, a man named Robert, who, after a romantic betrayal and being fired from his job, fell into a deep depression. Everything he knew crumbled. In desperation, he wrote to Hill saying he saw no point in continuing. Hill responded with a short, almost enigmatic letter. Use this. Robert didn't understand right away, but decided to follow the advice. He began writing about what he felt, uncensored, unmasked. He transformed his pain into words, and these words began to inspire others. Soon, what was once an outlet became a passion. He became a speaker, an author, and said that the worst day of his life was actually the birth of his purpose. Hill used this story as an example that suffering is neutralize, the thought that turns it into poison or medicine. What if this were exactly what life does to us? What if every pain we face were actually a summons to something greater? Hill said that humankind is constantly called to grow, but few respond. Most try to numb the pain, run from it, mask it, but every time you avoid feeling it, you postpone learning. The lesson continues to wait for you, patiently, on the other side of resistance. This is why some people face the same kind of disappointment over and over again. They aren't being punished. They are being reminded that they still don't understand. Interestingly, modern neuroscience studies confirm what Hill already intuited almost a century ago. Researchers have discovered that the human brain is capable of creating new neural connections whenever it experiences stress or loss. Grief literally restructures the mind. Areas linked to empathy, creativity, and resilience become more active after periods of well-processed. This means that grief is not just an emotional burden. It is a biological process of expansion. Pain, when understood, makes the mind more powerful, more complex, and more conscious. But why then do we insist on resisting? Perhaps because we've been taught to see pain as punishment, as language. He'll believe that life speaks to us in codes, and pain is one of them. Correct. When something hurts you, it's because something needs to change, not outside, but inside. The immediate reaction is to try to fix the external. But true transformation begins in the mind. Fire that consumes also purifies. The same blow that destroys illusion makes room for truth. One of the most intense moments in Hill's career occurred after the Great Depression of 1900. He saw men lose everything: fortune, status, family, and noticed something intriguing. Many of them, after the collapse, became wiser, more aware, and, paradoxically, freer. What seemed like ruin was, in a way, liberation. They discovered they had built their identity on externals, and when everything collapsed, what remained was essential: the ability to think. Hill wrote that the mind is the only asset no crisis can steal. This realization left a deep impression on him. Since then, he has taught that true success begins when a person lets go of the need to control the uncontrollable. Have you ever wondered how many times life tried to teach you something that you ignored because it hurt too much? How many times was discomfort simply an invitation to change direction? You insisted on staying. Hill said that pain is the soul's compass. When something hurts, it's because it's misaligned with its purpose. Instead of running away, he suggested observing, asking, "What is this feeling trying to show me?" This simple act changes everything. What was once suffering becomes instruction. What once seemed like chaos begins to reveal coherence. It is at this point that pain transforms into strength. Not because it disappears, but because it changes function. Hill believed that pain doesn't go away. It recycles itself. It transforms into patience, empathy, wisdom, compassion. Those who have fallen know where others stumble. Those who have cried know when another's silence cry for help. Pain humanizes, expands, teaches. And that is why those who have been through much, when awakened, become silent guides. They don't preach, inspire. They don't talk about light. They become light. When Hill said that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it, he wasn't talking about theory. He was talking about spiritual survival. He believed that the human mind is capable of transforming any tragedy, progress. There is no limit to the strength of those who understand the value of their own suffering. The transmutation of pain into wisdom is the turning point of consciousness. It is when the being ceases to be a victim of circumstances and becomes the creator of their own reality. And perhaps this is the secret the world still struggles to accept. Suffering is not the end of the line, but the beginning of maturity. It is the soil where inner power germinates. Hill would say that every tear is an invisible investment, and that every fall is a disguised step. When the mind understands this, life changes its tone. Pain ceases to be an enemy and partner. And you begin to see what Hill saw, that every adversity is a gateway to greatness, and that once you cross it, nothing can stop. There are times when silence is more powerful than any argument. When someone tries to hurt you with the past, hoping to see old guilt in your eyes, and all they find is calm, something shatters in the air. It's an invisible but perceptible scene. The other person's expectations are shattered, and they realize they've lost the power they thought they had over you. Napoleon Hill said that the man who masters his emotions is never defeated. And perhaps that's why the third response, the one that reveals the true intention behind the words, is so disconcerting. Asking, "Why are you bringing this up now?" is like suddenly turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, the shadows lose their shape. The attack dissipates because it stops being about you and starts exposing the one who initiated it. This question isn't a provocation. It's a mirror. It shifts the direction of energy. Anyone who wanted to put you on the defensive is forced to justify. Hill said that every attempt at manipulation is a quest for control, and every quest for control is born of fear. When someone insists on reminding you of who you were, they're actually trying to keep alive a version of you that gives security. The new you is frightening, unpredictable, free, too calm to be dominated. And that's what disconcerts the other person. They expected the same reaction, the old need for approval, same desire to be understood. But what they find is serenity. What they find is someone who doesn't need to win. just to remain whole. In one of his lectures, Hill recounted the story of a woman who, after years of personal growth, returned to the ex-husband who had humiliated her. He tried to provoke her with the same superior tone as before, recalling past mistakes, as if he still had the power to shame her. She looked him in the eye and, without anger, asked, "What do you hope to gain from this?" He stammered, looked away, and couldn't answer. That simple question broke a cycle of evil. She not only exposed his intentions, she also revealed that he was still trapped in what she had already left behind. Hill said that a free mind doesn't need to raise its voice. A single question is enough for the truth to reveal itself. But revelation doesn't always come without resistance. Sometimes when you refuse to react, the other person raises their voice, tries to force an emotion, wants to extract some response from you that proves you're still vulnerable. This is when true mastery is tested. Hill asserted that self-control is the exact measure of spiritual evolution. If the other person needs to provoke you to feel alive, it's because they've lost their center. When you respond calmly, show that you've found. And the most interesting thing, this posture doesn't humiliate, teaches. Serenity creates such a stark contrast that the other person, without realizing it, begins to question themselves. Have you ever noticed how silence can be more threatening than shouting? It offers no resistance. It also doesn't yield. It's a mirror that forces the other to face their own intention. Hill believed that conscious silence is one of the highest powers of the mind. He said that when a person reaches this state, no offense penetrates them, because the vibration of peace is higher than the vibration of conflict. Provocation loses its power, like a fist striking the void. Nothing to hit, nothing to hurt. Only the emptiness of one's own intention returning to its core. Hill was once asked how to deal with people who insist on digging up the past. He replied, "Observe. When you observe without reacting, the mask falls." This is one of the most subtle and difficult lessons to it. The ego wants to defend itself, wants to explain, wants to prove, but the spirit that has already understood doesn't need to prove anything. The true answer lies in the posture, not in the words. It's as if the energy itself says, "I've already learned, and I don't need to fight for it anymore." At this point, the other person realizes there's no longer any room, no longer any opening. They speak, but their words find no place to stick. Hill called this the law of silent return. Everything launched as an attack comes back to the sender, sooner or later. Not for revenge, but for harmony. A mind that remains calm returns the weight to its place of origin. That's why he warned, never go to war with someone in turmoil. Their chaos will try to lodge itself in you. When you understand this, you begin to see attacks differently. They cease to be personal and become merely manifestations of someone else's innocence. The other person's judgment isn't about you. It's a reflection of what they haven't yet understood within themselves. Comes a moment, inevitable. Question itself, why are you bringing this up? It stops being asked aloud. Comes an internal one. You ask it to yourself. When a painful memory arises, you ask, why is this coming back now? And the answer is almost always the same, because there is still something to be observed with greater awareness. Hill said that the enlightened person does not run away from what they feel. They examine each emotion like a scientist studying a natural phenomenon. They do not identify with the pain. They simply analyze it, and in analyzing it, it dissolves. But the outside world continues to test. And it's in these tests that you realize whether the transformation. Hill asserted that the universe repeats tests till the lesson is. If someone from the past provokes you again, still react, the learning is incomplete. If they return and you smile silently, it's a sign that you've finally overcome them. It's at this point that the power shifts. Stop being the target and become the observer. The other speaks, and their words echo in a space where there is no longer any wound. In one of his most profound reflections, Hill compared the serene man to a mountain. He said that the winds may blow furiously, but the mountain does not move. And if it does not move, all the wind can do is exhaust itself. This image sums up the spirit of the third response. It is not about confronting the other, but about remaining whole while the world around us is in turmoil. It is serenity that conquers chaos, not resistance. And this kind of mastery creates something almost mystical, the energy of presence. The simple stability of one who is unshaken transforms the environment. What was provocation becomes silence. What was conflict becomes understanding. Why then is it so difficult to achieve this state? Because it requires relinquishing the need to be right. Hill said that pride is the trap that most distances a man. As long as you want to win arguments, you will continue to react. As long as you need to prove your worth, you will continue to hurt yourself. The day there is no longer a need to be right, there will be peace. Silence will no longer be resistance. It will become natural, and the whole world will begin to perceive the difference between your strength and the noise of those who still struggle with their own reflection. In the end, the question, why are you bringing this up now, ceases to be a shield. It guides you inward. It teaches you that no one can bind you to a time you've already left. It shows that true freedom isn't forgetting the past. no longer belonging to it. Hill said that men trapped in what was live trying to correct what cannot be changed, while those who awaken dedicate their energy to what can still flourish. And when you understand this, the past ceases to be a threat and becomes a witness. It no longer haunts you, it accompanies you. It's proof that you survive. It is at this moment that power changes form. It is no longer the power to win arguments or silence those who accuse you. It is the power to exist in peace. The kind of power that doesn't shout, doesn't impose itself, and doesn't need to be acknowledged. It simply is. And perhaps that's why Hill said that serenity is the highest form of success. Because those who learn to remain calm when the world tries to reopen old wounds have already achieved the mastery few understand. Mastery over them. There comes a time when you understand that the entire journey thus far, the falls, losses, the arguments, the memories that seem to never go away, were not punishments, but invitations. Invitations to awaken, to take control of your mind, and direct your own destiny. Napoleon Hill said that the truly free man is not the one who conquers the world, the one who conquers himself. Perhaps this is the most profound lesson of all. There is no greater victory than serenity. Life is not about silencing the chaos of the world. It is about finding silence within it. And when you understand this, the past ceases to be a prison and becomes a map. It no longer holds you back, it guides you. Everything we've experienced has brought us to this point of awareness. Every mistake was a lesson, every disappointment a mirror, every loss a course adjustment. Hill asserted that failure doesn't exist, only results that show a better path. And if there's one thing you can apply starting today, it's this. Change the meaning of your experiences. Everything that has happened to you can serve you. The power to transform the meaning of things, what separates the ordinary man from the awakened man. Pain, when understood, becomes wisdom. Mistake, when accepted, becomes a tool. The past, when forgiven, is freedom. But to do so, a simple yet momentous step is necessary. Deciding not to react as before. Hill said that a person is the sum of their mental habits, and each reaction is a choice of who you are becoming. If someone tries to provoke you, observe before responding. If the past returns, breathe before reliving it. Time heals nothing by itself. What heals is awareness. It arises when you stop fighting what was and start using what is. Every thought is a seed, and the field is always fertile. Plant serenity, and you will reap clarity. Plant fear, and you will reap doubt. The choice is invisible, but the result is inevitable. Imagine for a moment, mind is like everything you think creates waves. If the waves are of anger, the reflection is distorted. If they are calm, the water becomes a mirror. Hill said that a peaceful mind is the greatest power tool ever created. With it, it is possible to rebuild all that was lost, restore health, restore relationships, and create opportunities. The energy that moves the universe is the same that inhabits human thought. When you direct this energy with clarity and purpose, the impossible becomes inevitable. Perhaps now as you hear these words, you realize you've spent much of your life trying to prove that you've changed, that you deserve respect. But Hill taught that true respect is born of inner silence, not external approval. A person who knows their worth doesn't need validation. They simply are. There's no argument that surpasses the presence of someone who has found their bearings. And that's precisely what changes the course of everything when you stop trying to convince the world and start convincing yourself. This is where Hill's philosophy becomes practical. 5. Think clearly, act purposefully, and speak only when words are more powerful than silence. If you apply this today, even just once, you will have already begun to change the course of your life. Because mastery of the mind is mastery of destiny. When you learn to choose your thoughts as you choose what you sow, the harvest ceases to be chance and becomes a consequence. The Stoic who lives in serenity and the disciple of Hill who thinks clearly are, in essence, the same being. Both understand that nothing external has power over someone who has found their center. You can't control the winds, but you can adjust the sails. You can't control what others say. You can choose what remains within. And it is this choice repeated every day, silently, in all situations, that builds true freedom. When Hill spoke of success, he wasn't referring only to material, but to the ability to live in peace with oneself, regardless of the circumstance. You can apply this right now. Observe what throws you off balance, what drains your energy, what makes you relive old pain. Everything that shakes you is actually a compass pointing to something that still needs attention. Instead of reacting, ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to show me? This simple question is the beginning of transformation. This is how thought becomes a tool of power. Hill said that the disciplined mind doesn't run away from pain, translates it. And when it translates, it frees it. What you can do starting today is begin training yourself in small gestures. When you feel the urge to respond, wait. When fear tries to take over, breathe. When the past knocks on the door, remember that it doesn't enter without permission. Talk to it calmly. Say, I learned you can go. This daily practice, repeated patiently, will create within you what Hill called a state of inner command, a point where no opinion unbalances you, no criticism hurts you, and mistake defines you. Little by little, you'll notice that the people around you begin to change, not because they've changed, but because their energy has. Hill argued that the human mind is a constant transmitter and receiver. What you emit returns. When your vibration is one of peace, life responds synchronically. Things flow, doors open, opportunities appear effortlessly. It's not magic, it's frequency. Serenity is a force that organizes the world. And when this state is consolidated, the presence of the past dissolves completely. You look back on everything that was and feel only gratitude. What once hurt becomes part of the story that made you strong. Hill said that gratitude is the highest thought a person can hold, as it transforms any reality into abundance. When you give thanks for what you've experienced, even the difficult ones, the universe understands that you've learned the lesson and delivers you the next level of your journey. Now, as this video draws to a close, you may feel something within you clarity that comes from the mind, but this feeling is the first sign of transformation. It indicates that you've understood, even if silently, that power lies not in circumstances, but in how you choose to position yourself in the face of them. Hill always ended his lectures by saying that success isn't an event, it's a habit. A habit of thinking, of feeling, of choosing what's worth keeping in mind. So, start today. Choose a powerful thought, an idea that lifts you up, and sustain it. Make it the starting point for it. Be the calm observer amidst the noise, the serene gaze in the face of provocation, the balanced voice amidst the confusion. This is how true strength is practiced. It's not by shouting louder, it's by remaining at peace when everything tries to take you away. Hill said that the man who remains calm when everyone else is losing control is the only truly powerful one. And if these words resonated within you, if they somehow reminded you of your strength and worth, allow yourself to continue on this path. Share this reflection with someone who needs a reminder of their power. Leave your comment, even if anonymous, because sometimes what you feel can inspire someone you don't even know. Like this video, if it brought you peace. And if you want to continue learning how to master your mind, control your emotions, and live with purpose, subscribe to the Stoicism every day. Because, as Napoleon Hill taught, power lies in daily practice. Every time you choose calm over reaction, learning over fear, you don't just change your day, you change your destiny.